She called him Dad at dinner, but hid a betrayal no family could forgive. Claire Carter called him Dad with a smile on her face. That was what Richard Carter would remember most. Not the birthday candles, not the roast on the table, not the laughter of grandchildren running through the hallway, not even the message that lit up beside her plate and split the family open. He would remember the way Claire leaned over, kissed his cheek, and said, "Happy birthday, Dad." She said it softly, naturally, as if the word belonged to her. And for years, Richard had believed it did. Claire had not been born into the Carter family, but Richard had treated her as if she had been. When Daniel first brought her home, she was nervous, polite, and unsure of where to stand in the busy Carter kitchen. Richard had noticed immediately. He had pulled out the chair beside him and said, "Sit here, sweetheart. If my son loves you, you're already family." Claire had cried that night in the car. Daniel had laughed and said, "Dad doesn't usually warm up that fast. I think he likes me," Claire said. "He does." And from then on, she became one of them. She helped Daniel's mother, Margaret, cook for holidays. She remembered everyone's birthdays. She learned which cousin did not eat onions, which uncle talked too loudly after wine, which family stories were funny, and which ones still carried pain. She stood beside Daniel at funerals, weddings, baptisms, and Sunday dinners. She called Margaret Mom after 2 years, and Richard Dad after 3. The first time she called him Dad, Richard had gone quiet. Then he cleared his throat and pretended something was in his eye. He had only one son, no daughters. Claire filled a place he had not known was empty. So on his 65th birthday, when she stood in his dining room wearing a soft cream dress and holding a wrapped gift, Richard smiled proudly as she kissed his cheek. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said. "Thank you, my girl," he answered. Daniel watched them from across the room, smiling. To Daniel, it was proof of something beautiful. His wife was not just accepted by his family, she was loved. No one at that table knew Claire's phone was already buzzing inside her purse. No one knew a man named Ryan Cole was waiting 3 streets away in a dark sedan. No one knew Claire had promised she would leave the dinner early. No one knew that the woman calling Richard Dad was carrying a betrayal that would soon make the word sound like a wound. The Carter family dining room was built for gatherings. Richard had designed the house that way after his construction company finally became successful. He wanted a table long enough for everyone. Children, grandchildren, cousins, neighbors, church friends, business partners, anyone who needed a chair and a plate. The table was dark walnut, polished until the chandelier lights glowed on its surface. On the wall behind Richard's chair were framed family photos. Daniel's high school graduation, Daniel and Claire's wedding, Christmas mornings, beach vacations, Richard and Margaret's 40th anniversary, family reunions where everyone wore white shirts and pretended not to argue before the pictures. Claire appeared in many of those photos, smiling beside Daniel, holding Margaret's arm, standing behind Richard with her hands on his shoulders, laughing with Daniel's cousins, holding her niece during Thanksgiving. She was woven into the family's visual history. That was why the betrayal would hurt beyond the marriage. It would not only break Daniel's heart, it would make everyone look at those photos differently. On the evening of Richard's birthday, the house smelled of roasted beef, garlic potatoes, green beans, and Margaret's famous apple pie. Children ran between rooms until Margaret threatened to make them sit at the kids' table forever. Daniel's sister Anna poured wine. Cousins filled the kitchen with noise. Richard sat at the head of the table, pretending not to enjoy being celebrated. Daniel stood near the fireplace, watching Claire help Margaret carry plates. She looked beautiful. Not in a dramatic way, in a familiar way. Her hair was pinned loosely. Her earrings were small pearls Richard and Margaret had given her on her last birthday. She moved through the kitchen like she belonged there. Daniel felt proud. He and Claire had been distant lately. He knew that. He had been working too much at Carter & Sons Construction, taking on more responsibility as Richard prepared to retire. He came home tired. He missed signals. He postponed conversations. He told himself marriage could survive a busy season because love was still there beneath the silence. But seeing Claire with his family made him feel hopeful. Maybe they were okay. Maybe they were only tired. Maybe tonight, surrounded by people who loved them, they could remember who they were. Then Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced down too quickly. Daniel noticed, but thought nothing of it. At least, not yet. Claire Carter had not always felt like a liar. That was what made the night so unbearable. She had loved Daniel. She still did, in a complicated, damaged way that made every lie feel worse, not easier. They had met in college at a volunteer event after a tornado damaged several homes outside town. Daniel showed up with work gloves, a toolbox, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to fix things. Claire was organizing supplies and trying to direct volunteers twice her age. A stack of boards slipped from a truck. Daniel caught them before they hit her foot. "You always stand under falling lumber?" he asked. "Only when I'm trying to impress people. Working? Not yet." He smiled. That smile changed her life. Daniel was steady in a world where Claire had known too much uncertainty. Her own father had left when she was young. Her mother worked 2 jobs and loved her fiercely but tiredly. Claire grew up learning not to expect too much from men. Daniel was different. He called when he said he would. He listened. He remembered small things. He showed up. When he brought her home to the Carters, Claire was terrified. Their family seemed loud, confident, rooted. They had traditions, jokes, history. They knew who they were. Claire felt like a guest in a language she did not speak. Richard changed that. He welcomed her before she earned it. That was a gift. For years, she honored it. Then the Carter family's warmth slowly became expectation. Not because they were cruel. They were not. But families can love a person into a role so completely that they forget to ask whether the person inside it is still breathing. Claire became the good daughter-in-law, the helpful one, the gentle one. The one who remembered birthdays, hosted showers, soothed conflicts, and stood beside Daniel when business stress made him quiet. Richard adored her, but his affection came with belonging to the Carter world. Family dinners every Sunday, company events, church fundraisers, holiday traditions, expectations dressed as love. Daniel was pulled deeper into the family business every year. Richard still made decisions, still gave orders, still treated Daniel like the son who needed shaping. Daniel wanted to prove himself, and proving himself meant being available whenever Richard called. Claire often felt like she had married not just Daniel, but the Carter name. One night, months before the birthday dinner, she told Daniel, "Sometimes I feel like I'm your wife second, and a Carter family employee first." Daniel looked exhausted. "That's not fair." "Maybe not. But it's how I feel. My family loves you." "I know. Then what's the problem?" Claire laughed softly. "The problem is that everyone loves who I am for them." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means your father calls me his daughter, but he still expects me to show up, smile, serve, forgive, and never be difficult. Your mother depends on me. Your cousins call me when they need something. You bring me into every family obligation and call it love." Daniel's face tightened. "I thought you liked being part of the family." "I did," she said. "I do. But sometimes I want to be seen as Claire before I'm seen as Daniel's wife or Richard's daughter-in-law." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what you want me to do." Claire looked at him sadly. "That's what scares me." They did not solve it. They rarely solved anything anymore. They apologized, slept, woke up, and continued. Ryan Cole entered through the family business. He was not a stranger to the Carters. That made everything worse. Ryan owned a small design and branding firm that helped local companies modernize their image. Carter & Sons hired him to redesign their website and marketing materials as Richard prepared to hand more leadership to Daniel. Ryan was charismatic, polished, and careful with attention. He was the kind of man who made whoever he spoke to feel temporarily important. Claire met him at a company dinner. Daniel was busy discussing contracts with Richard and 2 project managers. Claire stood near the drink table, listening to a conversation she had heard too many times before. Bids, permits, labor costs, delays, margins. Ryan approached with 2 glasses of water. "You look like someone who has heard enough about concrete pricing for one evening," he said. Claire laughed before she could stop herself. "That obvious? I work in branding. Reading bored faces is part of the job." She accepted the water. "I'm Claire." "I know." Daniel's wife. Her smile tightened. Ryan noticed. "Sorry," he said. "That sounded like a label." "It usually is." He tilted his head. "What would you rather be called?" Claire was surprised by the question. "My name," she said. "Claire, then." It was simple. Too simple. But it felt like a door opening. Over the next few months, Ryan appeared at company meetings, dinners, and family-adjacent events. He learned quickly that Claire felt swallowed by the Carter orbit. He did not push at first. He only observed, then commented gently, "Richard really runs every room, doesn't he?" Daniel seems like he's always trying to earn approval he already should have. You're good at making everyone comfortable. Does anyone do that for you? Claire should have heard the danger. Instead, she heard relief. Someone noticed. Their messages began professionally. Then, personally. Ryan sent a draft invitation for a Carter event and added, "You should have veto power. You're the only person in that family with taste." Claire replied with a laughing emoji. Then he wrote, "Serious question. Do you ever get tired of being everyone's graceful solution?" She stared at that message for a long time, then typed, "Yes." That was the first honest answer she gave the wrong person. The affair began emotionally. That was the phrase Claire would later use in counseling, and Daniel would hate it because it sounded like a softer room for the same betrayal. But it was true. Before Ryan touched her, Claire had already given him private access to parts of her heart she had stopped bringing to Daniel. She told him she felt invisible. She told him Richard's affection sometimes felt like ownership. She told him Daniel was a good man but a tired husband. She told him she missed laughing, without checking whether she was disappointing someone. Ryan listened and said the things Daniel did not know how to say. "You deserve to be more than useful. You don't owe a family your whole self just because they welcomed you. Sometimes love becomes a cage because everyone keeps calling it home." Those words were not entirely wrong. That made them dangerous. The first kiss happened after a late meeting at Ryan's office. Claire had stopped by to approve printed programs for a Carter charity event. Rain tapped against the windows. Ryan walked her to the door. "You don't have to go back to being their perfect Claire tonight," he said. She looked at him. "I don't know how to be anyone else. I see someone else." He kissed her. She pulled away immediately. "This is wrong." "Yes," he said. "I'm married. I know. To a good man." Ryan's face changed slightly. Good men can still fail women. That sentence became her excuse, until it became her shame. The affair lasted 4 months. 4 months of deleted messages, false errands, careful smiles, and family dinners where Claire sat beside Daniel while Ryan's words lived in her phone. Ryan grew impatient. He wanted her to leave Daniel. Claire kept saying she needed time. What she meant was that she wanted 2 lives to remain possible. The security of Daniel and the intensity of Ryan, the love of the Carters and the escape from being a Carter, the table where she belonged, and the secret where she felt chosen. No one can hold 2 lives forever. Eventually one begins calling during dinner. Richard's birthday dinner was supposed to be safe. Claire told herself she would attend, smile, give Richard his gift, help Margaret clean up, then leave early with a headache and meet Ryan one last time. One last time. The lie people tell when they know they are not ready to stop. Ryan had texted her that afternoon. "Tonight. No more excuses. You sit at their table and call him Dad, but you'll come back to me afterward." Claire felt sick reading it. She should have blocked him. She should have told Daniel. She should have stayed home. Instead, she dressed for dinner. Daniel looked at her when she came downstairs. "You look beautiful." The compliment startled her. "Thank you." He stepped closer. "Are we okay?" Her throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You felt far away." She almost laughed from the cruel timing. "I'm just tired." He nodded, but his face showed he did not fully believe her. "We should talk after tonight." Panic flashed through her. "After your dad's birthday?" "Yes." She forced a smile. "Okay." He touched her hand. "I miss you." For one moment Claire almost confessed everything. Then her phone buzzed in her purse. "Ryan." She pulled her hand away too quickly. Daniel noticed. But before he could ask, they were late, and the dinner waited. At Richard's house, Claire performed beautifully. That was what made the memory unbearable. She hugged Margaret. She complimented Anna's new haircut. She helped pour water. She laughed when Richard complained that turning 65 sounded elderly and government-issued. She gave him a leather-bound notebook with his initials stamped on the cover. "For your retirement plans," she said. Richard smiled. "You trying to push me out of the company, sweetheart? Someone has to." Everyone laughed. Richard pointed at Daniel. "See, that's why I love this girl. She's the only one brave enough to insult me at my own table." Claire smiled. Daniel looked at her with quiet affection. The room was warm. That warmth nearly crushed her. Because she did love them. That was the complication no one wanted later. She loved Margaret's gentle fussing. She loved Richard's booming laugh. She loved Daniel's sister Anna, who had become like her own sister in many ways. She loved the nieces and nephews who called her Aunt Claire. She loved the family stories, the Sunday dinners, the noisy kitchens. But love mixed with lies becomes poison. During dinner, Ryan texted 3 times. Claire ignored the first 2. The third came as Richard stood to make his birthday toast. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. Richard looked around the table, his expression softer than usual. "I built many things in my life," he said. "Houses, offices, a business, a reputation. But none of it matters more than this table." Margaret smiled through tears. Richard continued, "Family is the only thing a man truly leaves behind." His eyes moved to Daniel. "My son has made me proud every day, even when he argues like his mother." Laughter moved around the table. Then Richard looked at Claire. "And Claire," her heart stopped. "You didn't just marry into this family. You became one of us. I've told people for years I finally got the daughter I never had." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but not the kind the family understood. Richard raised his glass. "To family, by blood, by marriage, and by loyalty." Everyone lifted their glasses. Claire forced a smile. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. Her phone lit up beside her plate. The screen faced upward. Richard saw it first. "Ryan, can't wait to see you after dinner. Does Daniel still think you're staying with his family all night?" Richard's smile disappeared. The glass remained raised in his hand. Claire saw his face and followed his eyes to the phone. She snatched it quickly and turned it over. Too quickly. Daniel noticed. So did Amna. So did Margaret. The room did not yet know what had happened, but warmth drained from the table as if someone had opened a door to winter. Richard slowly lowered his glass. Claire's hands trembled. Daniel looked between them. "What was that?" Claire shook her head. "Nothing." Richard stared at her. The word Dad still hung in the air. Now it sounded different. Richard did not expose her immediately. Some people thought later that he should have. Maybe he thought so too. But in that moment, the shock was too intimate. He could not understand how the woman he had called his daughter could sit at his birthday table with another man waiting in her phone. So he finished the toast with a strained smile. Dinner continued. Badly. Forks touched plates. Conversations restarted in broken pieces. Daniel kept glancing at Claire. Margaret watched Richard. Anna watched everyone. Claire felt as if she were sitting inside a room made of glass. Her phone buzzed again in her lap. She did not look. After dessert, she stood. "I'm sorry, I have a terrible headache. I think I should go home." Daniel pushed back his chair. "I'll take you." "No." Her answer came too fast. "No, stay. It's your dad's birthday. I can drive myself." Daniel frowned. "We came together. I can call a ride." Richard's eyes sharpened. "A ride?" he asked. Claire could not meet his gaze. "I just need some air." She stepped away from the table. Daniel stood, but Margaret touched his arm. "Give her a minute," she whispered, sensing only part of the danger. Richard did not wait. He followed Claire through the hallway and out onto the front porch. The evening air was cool. Streetlights glowed beyond the driveway. Claire was already walking toward the side street, not the driveway. Richard stepped onto the path. "Claire." She froze. Slowly, she turned. "Dad." He flinched. "Do not call me that right now." Tears filled her eyes. Before she could speak, a dark sedan idled near the corner. The driver's door opened. Ryan Cole stepped out. Richard recognized him immediately from Carter business meetings. For a second, everything became horribly clear. Ryan walked toward Claire, then stopped when he saw Richard. Claire looked trapped between them. Ryan's face tightened. "Claire." Richard's voice was low. "This is who was texting you." Claire began crying. "Please, let me explain." Ryan stepped closer. "She was coming with me." Richard turned to him slowly. "You are standing outside my home on my birthday, waiting for my son's wife?" Ryan did not answer. Daniel's voice came from behind them. "Claire?" She closed her eyes. Daniel stood on the porch steps, his face confused, then slowly horrified as he saw Ryan, his father, and Claire in the same line of sight. He walked down. "What is going on?" No one spoke. That silence told him enough to fear the answer. Ryan said, "Daniel, this isn't how—" Daniel's eyes snapped to him. "Do not say my name." Claire sobbed. Daniel looked at his wife. "Who is he to you?" She covered her mouth. Daniel's face changed. "No." Richard looked at Claire, his voice shaking with fury and grief. "You called me Dad 5 minutes ago. Were you lying to me too?" Claire whispered no. Richard's eyes filled. "Then what were you doing?" She could not answer. Daniel stepped back as if the ground had shifted. The family inside had gone quiet. Shadows moved behind the front window. People were watching now. The betrayal had reached the table. The confrontation moved back inside because Richard refused to let the neighbors hear the Carter family break. Ryan was ordered to leave. At first, he resisted. Claire needs to decide what she wants. Daniel turned toward him. My wife will answer for what she did. You will leave my father's property before I forget there are children inside. Ryan looked at Claire. For 1 second, everyone saw the question in his eyes. Come with me? Claire looked at him through tears, and finally saw him clearly. He was not freedom. He was not truth. He was the man waiting outside a family birthday dinner, willing to turn her life into an explosion because secrecy no longer satisfied him. She shook her head. Ryan's jaw tightened. He got into his car and drove away. Inside, the family had gathered in the dining room, but no one sat. The table remained full of half-eaten dessert, wine glasses, folded napkins, and Richard's birthday cake with candles burned low. Claire stood near the doorway. Daniel stood across from her. Richard remained at the head of the table, but he no longer looked like the powerful patriarch. He looked like an old man who had been fooled by someone he loved. Daniel spoke first. How long? Claire trembled. Daniel. How long? 4 months. Margaret gasped. Anna covered her mouth. Daniel closed his eyes. Physical? Claire broke down. Yes. Daniel turned away. The room seemed to collapse inward. Richard gripped the back of his chair. In my business? He asked. Claire cried harder. Ryan worked with our family, Richard said. He sat at this table once. I know. You let him into this family and into your marriage? Daniel looked back at her. No, he said quietly. She let him into our marriage. We let him into the family. His voice was calm, but his face was devastated. Claire reached toward him. He stepped back. You didn't just betray me, Claire. You sat at my father's table and let this family love you while you were planning to leave with another man. She sobbed. I wasn't planning to leave forever. I was confused. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Confused? Margaret flinched. Richard's voice broke. You called me Dad. I stood here and told everyone you were my daughter. Claire whispered, I loved you like a father. No, Richard said. Love without honesty becomes cruelty. That sentence silenced the room. Claire lowered her head. Daniel looked at the family photos on the wall. There she was in so many frames. Claire with them at Christmas. Claire at the lake. Claire beside Richard at the company anniversary. He wondered how many smiles had been real. That question hurt because the answer was not simple. Many had been real. That made the lie worse. Later that night, Daniel and Claire returned home in separate cars. Daniel did not speak during the drive. Claire followed him, crying so hard she could barely see through the windshield. At home, the silence felt enormous. Daniel stood in the living room while Claire remained near the door like a guest. Tell me everything, he said. So she did. Not beautifully, not cleanly, but fully enough. The messages, the meetings, the kiss, the affair, Ryan's pressure, her plan to leave dinner early, the promise that it would be one last time. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked, Did you love him? Claire cried. I thought I loved how he saw me. That is not what I asked. She closed her eyes. I don't know. Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes uncertainty hurts more than a clear answer. Claire stepped closer. I felt invisible. I know. You were always working. Always with your father. Always trying to prove something to him. I felt like I had become part of the Carter machinery. I know, Daniel said. She looked surprised. He continued, I know I failed you. I know I let my father and the business take too much space in our marriage. I know I expected you to show up for my family without asking what it cost you. Tears ran down her face. But, he said, voice breaking, none of that made you betray me. She whispered, I know. You wanted to be seen as more than my wife and their daughter-in-law, he said. So you became the woman who lied to all of us. Claire sank onto the couch. I'm sorry. Daniel looked toward the family photo on the mantel. A picture from the previous Christmas. Claire between him and Richard, smiling. Family gave you a seat at the table, he said. You used that seat to hide a betrayal. She covered her face. There was nothing left to say that night. Daniel slept in the guest room. Claire did not sleep at all. The family broke in stages. Margaret called the next morning and cried. Not angry tears at first. Grief. Claire, she said, did we make you feel trapped? Claire sat on the kitchen floor, phone in hand. No, not like that. Then why didn't you tell us you were unhappy? Claire closed her eyes. Because being loved by you made it harder to admit I was angry. Margaret cried harder. Anna called later, angrier. You let us defend you, she said. I told people Daniel was lucky to have you. I know. You helped me plan my baby shower while you were sneaking around with Ryan? Claire had no defense. Yesh. Anna's voice broke. I don't know who you are. Claire whispered. Neither did I. Richard did not call. That hurt more. Daniel moved into a small apartment near the company office within the week. He told Claire he needed space and asked her not to contact him except for practical matters until counseling began. Ryan tried to reach her twice. She blocked him. Then he sent an email. They'll never forgive you. I still will. Claire stared at the screen. Once, that would have sounded like love. Now it sounded like a trap. She replied, You waited outside a family dinner while I lied to people who loved me. You did not save me. You helped me become someone I cannot respect. Do not contact me again. Then she blocked the email too. The silence afterward was unbearable, but honest. Counseling began a month later. Daniel came because he needed to understand whether anything could be saved. Claire came because she knew wanting forgiveness was not the same as deserving it. The counselor asked what moment hurt most. Daniel answered without hesitation, the toast. Claire closed her eyes. The counselor asked why. Daniel looked at her. Because my father said she was his daughter. Because she called him Dad. Because for 1 minute, I thought I was watching the family I had always wanted. My wife loved by my father. My marriage part of something bigger. His voice shook. Then her phone lit up, and I realized the whole room had been loving an image. Claire cried silently. The counselor turned to her. What do you hear him saying? Claire wiped her face. That I didn't only betray Daniel. I betrayed the family that welcomed me. Daniel looked down. Claire continued. I used their love as cover. I let Richard call me daughter while another man waited for me outside. I made the word dad part of the lie. That sentence made Daniel close his eyes. It was the first time she named the wound correctly. Not enough to heal it, but enough to stop making it smaller. They spent months in that room. Daniel admitted the marriage had been crowded by his family and the business. He admitted he often failed to protect Claire's individuality. He admitted he had mistaken her competence for contentment. Claire admitted she had chosen secrecy because it was easier than confrontation. She admitted Ryan made her feel seen, but only the hidden version of her. She admitted she had wanted the comfort of the Carter family while resenting the role it gave her. Truth came slowly, painfully, but truth did not guarantee restoration. Richard refused counseling at first. I don't need a therapist to tell me I was betrayed, he said when Margaret suggested it, but Richard was not as steady as he pretended. He stopped hosting Sunday dinners. The dining room remained unused for months. He avoided looking at the family photos on the wall. He removed one frame from the mantel, the photo of Claire kissing his cheek at a past Christmas, and placed it in a drawer. Margaret found him one night sitting alone at the dining table. No food, no lights, except the chandelier. He was staring at the chair Claire usually occupied. She called me Dad, he said. Margaret sat beside him. She did. I believed her. I think part of her meant it. Richard's face hardened. Don't defend her. I'm not. I'm saying betrayal hurts more when love was real too. Richard looked away. That was the part he did not want to accept. He wanted Claire to have been false from the beginning. A liar all along. A woman who had tricked them. But memory refused. He remembered her bringing soup when he was sick, sitting with Margaret after surgery, helping him choose a birthday gift for Daniel, crying when he called her daughter the first time. Was all of that fake? No. And yes. And not exactly. Betrayal makes even real love look suspicious. That was why it damaged families so deeply. It did not only wound the present, it rewrote the past with doubt. 6 months after the birthday dinner, Daniel and Claire met at Richard's house again, not for dinner, for an apology. Claire had asked Richard if he would speak to her. He ignored the first message, then the second. On the third, he replied with one word, come. She arrived alone. Daniel came too, at Richard's request. The dining room looked different. The table was bare. No candles, no food, no photos of celebration. Just wood, chairs, and the memory of the night everything changed. Claire stood near the chair where she had sat that evening. Richard entered slowly. He looked older. Claire began crying before she spoke. I'm sorry, she said. Richard said nothing. I'm sorry for betraying Daniel. I'm sorry for bringing Ryan near this family. I'm sorry for sitting at your table and pretending I was whole when I was hiding something rotten." Her voice broke. "And I'm sorry I called you Dad that night." Richard's jaw tightened. Claire continued, "Not because I never loved you like family. I did. But because I used that word while planning to leave with another man. I made it part of my performance. That was cruel." Richard looked away. For a long time, silence filled the room. Then he asked, "Was any of it real?" Claire cried harder. "Yesh." Richard looked at her. "That is what makes it worse. I know. You let me love you as my daughter. I know. And you let my son sit beside you, proud that you belonged here. I know." Richard's eyes filled. "Why?" Claire swallowed. "Because I wanted to be loved by everyone and honest with no one." Daniel looked down. Richard closed his eyes. That answer landed because it was finally true. He did not forgive her that day. But he stopped asking whether the past had all been fake. That was something. Daniel and Claire tried for 2 more months. They attended counseling. They had quiet dinners. They walked through parks. They talked about marriage, family, boundaries, Ryan, Richard, loneliness, identity, and all the truths that had arrived too late. Some moments felt almost tender. Then Daniel would remember the phone lighting up beside her plate, or the way she said Dad during the toast, or Ryan standing outside his father's house, and tenderness would turn back into grief. One evening, Daniel said what they both knew. "I don't think I can stay married." Claire closed her eyes. They were sitting in his apartment, takeout containers between them, rain sliding down the windows. "I know," she whispered. "I believe you're sorry." "I am. I believe you loved my family in some real way." "I did. I believe I failed you before this happened." She shook her head. "You did not make me do it." "No. But I need to own what is mine." She nodded. He continued, "But I cannot rebuild a marriage where my whole family became part of the disguise. It wasn't only you and me anymore. It was my father's table, my mother's trust, Anna's friendship, every photo on that wall." Claire cried silently. "I know. I don't want to bring you back to family dinners where everyone is wondering if the woman beside me is really there. You shouldn't have to." Daniel's face broke. "I loved seeing you call him Dad." Claire covered her mouth. "I know. That memory used to make me happy." "I'm sorry." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "So Amy?" The divorce was filed quietly 2 weeks later. The Carter family never returned to exactly what it had been. Sunday dinners eventually resumed, but not every week. Richard's birthday the following year was held at a restaurant instead of the house. No one said why. Everyone knew. Daniel moved into a smaller home on the other side of town. He stayed in the family business but set boundaries Richard had never expected from him. No more Sunday work calls. No more mandatory dinners. No more using family loyalty to avoid difficult conversations. Richard resisted. Then, slowly, he adjusted, not because he liked it, because he had learned that a family can look united at a table and still be full of hidden fractures. Daniel changed too. He became more careful with attention. He understood too late that a spouse can be surrounded by family and still feel unseen. He did not take responsibility for Claire's betrayal, but he did take responsibility for the ways he had let his marriage become crowded by everyone except the 2 people inside it. Claire moved away for a while. She rented a small apartment in Chattanooga and returned to design work. No Carter name, no Ryan, no family role, no daughter-in-law expectations, just Claire. At first, the silence frightened her. Then it taught her. She went to therapy. She learned that wanting to be seen did not justify becoming dishonest. She learned that being welcomed into a family was a gift, not a prison unless she refused to speak truthfully about how the role affected her. She learned that Ryan had not loved her whole self. He had loved the hidden self because secrecy gave him power. Years later, when she thought of him, she felt no longing. Only shame and clarity. 2 years after the divorce, Claire returned to Nashville for Margaret's surgery. Margaret had insisted she did not need help. Claire came anyway, but only after asking Daniel if it would be appropriate. Daniel said, "Mom would like to see you." So Claire visited the hospital. Richard was there, sitting beside Margaret's bed, reading glasses low on his nose. When Claire entered, the room became still. Margaret smiled weakly. Claire. Claire leaned down and hugged her gently. Richard watched in silence. After a while, Margaret fell asleep. Claire stepped into the hallway. Richard followed. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "Thank you for coming." Claire nodded. "She was good to me. She loved you. Claire's eyes filled. I know. Richard looked down the hallway. I did too. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know. I was angry that you made me doubt that. I'm sorry. He nodded slowly. I know you are. She did not ask if he forgave her. He did not say it. But before she left, Richard touched her shoulder once. Not like before. Not father and daughter. But not hatred either. Sometimes that is all forgiveness can offer after damage spreads through a family. Not restoration, but the end of wishing someone destroyed. Claire accepted it with gratitude. Daniel eventually began dating again. Slowly. A woman named Rebecca, a teacher, entered his life through a community fundraiser. She was kind, direct, and uninterested in performing perfection for anyone's family. On their fourth date, Daniel told her about Claire. Not every detail. Enough. Rebecca listened carefully. Then she said, I don't want to be absorbed into your family before I'm known by you. Daniel started at her. The sentence was so precise it almost hurt. You won't be, he said. Good. Because I'll like them better if I don't have to disappear into them. Daniel laughed softly. Then he promised himself he would not make the same mistake twice. When he eventually brought Rebecca to a Carter dinner, Richard was polite but careful. Margaret was warm. Anna was friendly. Daniel watched Rebecca laugh at something his mother said, and instead of feeling proud that she fit perfectly, he asked her on the drive home, How did you feel tonight? Rebecca smiled. Seen. A little overwhelmed, but seen. Daniel reached for her hand. That answer mattered more than any performance at the table. Claire never called another man dad, not because she stopped loving father figures, because she understood the weight of the word. Years after the divorce, she wrote in her journal, the word dad was not the lie by itself. The lie was accepting a family's love while hiding a betrayal against the son who brought me to their table. I wanted belonging without honesty. That is not family. That is performance. She paused, then wrote, Family is not built only by blood, but by trust. When someone is welcomed to the table and calls another man dad while hiding betrayal in their heart, the wound does not end with one marriage. It spreads through every person who believed they were loving one of their own. She closed the journal and sat quietly in her small apartment. No buzzing phone. No Ryan waiting outside. No dinner table full of people she was deceiving. Only truth. Late, painful, but finally hers. On Richard's 70th birthday, the family gathered again at the long walnut table. Claire was not there. Her absence was not spoken of often, but it lived in the empty space between old traditions and new caution. Daniel sat beside Rebecca. Margaret served pie. Anna's children argued over who got the biggest slice. Richard made a speech shorter than usual. He raised his glass. To family, he said. Then he paused. The room quieted. Richard looked at Daniel, then around the table. To family, not just the kind that sits together, but the kind brave enough to tell the truth before the table becomes a stage. Daniel's throat tightened. Margaret reached for Richard's hand. Everyone drank. The dinner continued. There was laughter. There was still love, but it was different now. Less innocent, more honest. And maybe that was what survived after betrayal. Not the old family, untouched and shining, but a humbler one that understood love without truth, could not protect anyone for long. Daniel looked at the chair where Claire had once sat. For the first time, he did not feel only pain. He felt memory, sadness, and release. She had been part of them once. She had broken something real. Both truths could sit at the table now, and neither needed to be hidden.